The evening air outside the upscale restaurant was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine from nearby planters. Inside, the space buzzed with the quiet clinking of cutlery and murmurs of well-dressed patrons. The warm golden lights reflected off polished wood and sparkling glasses, creating an atmosphere of elegance and sophistication. Among the waitstaff, a shy young woman moved quietly, clutching a small notepad to her chest. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her apron, trying to steady herself before stepping onto the dining floor. Tonight, she had been assigned to a special table, one she had overheard being referred to by the manager as the VIP section. Her heart skipped a beat at the thought. She had no idea who would be seated there, only that she must perform flawlessly. Moments later, the bell above the restaurant door jingled, signaling the arrival of guests. The shy waitress glanced up and froze. A man, sharply dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, entered with a woman she immediately recognized as older and dignified. Something about her posture and expression made her seem regal. She noticed the way the woman's hands moved, subtly and deliberately, shaping words in the air. The waitress's heart raced as she realized the woman was communicating in sign language. Her mind flitted nervously. Do I know enough to understand her? She had learned a little during her free time but never expected to encounter someone using it in real life, let alone at work. As the man, clearly the woman's son, approached the table, the other staff members exchanged uncertain glances. There were hushed whispers, barely audible above the soft jazz playing in the background. The maitre d' gestured for the couple to be seated, and the shy waitress was summoned to take their order. Her legs felt like lead as she walked toward them, her notepad pressed tightly to her chest. Every step echoed in her mind, each one amplifying her nerves. She had to get this right. "Good evening, sir, ma'am," she said softly, her voice almost blending with the background hum. The woman looked up at her, eyes bright, and moved her hands in quick, precise gestures. The waitress's heart sank slightly. She caught only fragments of the words, realizing she would need to rely on her limited knowledge and intuition. The mother's expressions were warm but patient, a stark contrast to the anxious tension that gripped the waitress. She took a deep breath and tried to remember what she had practiced countless times, the lessons she had learned in private, away from the eyes of strangers. Slowly, she began to mimic the gestures she recognized, matching them with the words she could recall. At first, the movements felt awkward, clumsy even, but she forced herself to focus. The mother's eyes widened slightly, and a subtle smile played at her lips. Encouraged, the waitress gained a fraction of confidence and continued, signing as clearly as she could. To her amazement, the woman's face lit up with surprise and joy, as if she had not expected anyone to understand her so effortlessly. The billionaire watched quietly, his curiosity piqued. There was a brief pause in the conversation as he studied the waitress, noting her focus, her shyness, and yet the way her eyes sparkled when she realized she could communicate. Around them, other diners had begun to notice the unusual scene unfolding. The waitress, once invisible in her nervousness, was now the center of attention, her trembling hands shaping words that bridged a world of silence. By the time she finished taking the order, the mother's smile had transformed into a small, genuine laugh, and the waitress felt a rush of relief and exhilaration. For the first time that evening, she stood a little taller. Her shyness softened by the warmth of connection. The table was no longer intimidating. It was a place where she had made a difference, however small. And as she walked back toward the kitchen, her heart still racing, she couldn't help but wonder what might come next. After the initial exchange, the shy waitress returned to the side station, her hands still tingling from the rush of adrenaline. Her mind replayed the brief moment she had signed with the billionaire's mother, the way the older woman's eyes had sparkled with surprise and warmth. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady the rapid beat of her heart. She had never felt such a mixture of nervousness and exhilaration before, and a small, almost embarrassed smile tugged at her lips. Back at the table, the mother's gaze followed her with interest, and she began to make subtle gestures again. The waitress noticed immediately, her curiosity flaring. Though her hands were slightly shaky, she returned to the table, determined to communicate as best she could. She took a deep breath, recalling lessons she had learned in private sessions and online tutorials. Sign language had always fascinated her, but she had kept it mostly as a quiet skill, something personal she rarely shared. Now, the real test was here, and the stakes felt impossibly high. "Good evening again," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, but there was a steadiness in it that had not been there before. She began signing, carefully forming each gesture she remembered. To her relief, the mother's face lit up instantly, and she responded with fluid, precise motions. The waitress struggled to keep up, but each successful exchange brought a sense of empowerment that surprised her. It was as if, for the first time, her quiet dedication had found a purpose. As the conversation unfolded, she learned that the mother loved certain dishes the restaurant specialized in. The waitress suggested a few options by signing slowly and clearly, and the mother nodded enthusiastically, pointing to the items she preferred. Their communication became smoother with each gesture, almost like a secret language shared between just the two of them. The billionaire leaned back slightly in his chair, observing the interaction with a mixture of astonishment and admiration. He had expected polite service, maybe some awkward attempts at conversation, but this seamless connection between his mother and the young waitress had caught him completely off guard. The other staff began to take notice, whispering quietly to one another. "Did you see that?" one murmured. "She's actually fluent." The waitress, absorbed in her task, barely registered the attention, her focus entirely on the mother's hands and expressions. There was a joy in the exchange, a rare warmth that went beyond mere duty. Every smile, every laugh, strengthened an invisible bond between them. The mother even signed something personal, a small story about her younger years traveling abroad, and the waitress responded with understanding gestures, nodding and reacting appropriately. A subtle wave of emotion passed between them, unspoken yet profound. With the order finally confirmed, the waitress carefully noted down every detail, ensuring nothing was missed. She glanced at the mother one last time, who winked and gave a thumbs up in quiet approval. The billionaire's expression softened, a flicker of gratitude and pride crossing his face. He realized that the young woman's quiet courage and hidden skill had done what words could not. She had bridged a world of silence, creating genuine connection. As the waitress walked back to the kitchen, her steps felt lighter. Her nerves had not disappeared entirely, but they were replaced by a growing confidence and an undeniable sense of purpose. Something had shifted, not just in the restaurant that evening, but within herself. She had touched someone's life in a meaningful way, and the ripple effects were only beginning. The dinner service continued around her, but she moved through the space differently now, not merely a shy employee, but someone capable of connection, empathy, and perhaps, something greater still. The restaurant had settled into a gentle rhythm by the time the waitress returned to the table with the first course. The golden light from the chandeliers cast soft patterns across the polished surfaces, and the low hum of conversation created a cozy, intimate atmosphere despite the bustling crowd. The mother's eyes lit up as she saw the plates arrive, and the waitress carefully signed to confirm that everything was prepared exactly as she preferred. This small exchange, simple as it seemed, had already begun to forge a deeper connection. As they began to eat, the mother continued signing, her gestures smooth and confident. She shared little anecdotes about her life, subtle stories that revealed humor, curiosity, and a sharp intellect. The waitress listened intently, signing back responses, asking questions, and laughing at the appropriate moments. The mother's laughter was soft and melodic, a sound that seemed to infuse the entire table with warmth. For the first time that evening, the waitress felt completely at ease, the nervous tension that had gripped her earlier replaced by a comforting sense of belonging. The billionaire, seated across from them, watched in silent fascination. He had encountered many staff members over the years, polite, competent, perhaps charming, but none had moved him the way this shy, quiet girl was now captivating his mother. Every gesture she made, every word she signed, displayed not only skill but genuine care. It was clear that this connection could not be taught or faked. It was authentic, born of empathy and quiet courage. He found himself leaning back, letting a small smile tug at his lips, a rare display of emotion for someone so often reserved. Other diners had begun to notice the interaction as well. Whispers floated around the room, patrons glancing curiously at the table where the young waitress was holding her own with such grace and confidence. Staff members paused, exchanging amazed looks. It was a scene that seemed to defy expectations, a shy, unassuming girl commanding the attention and admiration of everyone simply by being herself and using her hidden talents. The waitress continued signing with the mother, discovering shared interests she had never expected. The mother's eyes sparkled as she described favorite books, travel memories, and even small regrets that had lingered over the years. The waitress responded with empathy and encouragement, her gestures conveying understanding and warmth. In return, the mother's demeanor softened even further, her pride in the girl's ability shining clearly through her expressions. Midway through the meal, the billionaire finally broke the silence between himself and the waitress. "I have to say," he began, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable edge of curiosity, "it's rare to see someone connect with her the way you just did." The waitress's heart skipped a beat, her hands pausing in midair as she processed his words. She managed a small, nervous smile, signing back that she had only been trying to communicate respectfully. The mother laughed softly at the exchange, signing a comment that made both the waitress and her son chuckle. It was a delicate, heartwarming moment, the kind that lingers in memory. The waitress felt an unfamiliar warmth spreading through her chest, a mix of pride, relief, and happiness. She realized that her quiet dedication to learning sign language had not only allowed her to perform her duties but had created a real, meaningful bond with someone who mattered profoundly to another person. As dessert arrived, the mother reached across the table and gave a small, affectionate gesture, a sign that spoke volumes in its simplicity. The waitress returned it with careful precision, feeling a surge of validation and connection. For the first time that evening, she understood the power of empathy, the impact of attention, and the value of courage in small, quiet acts. The billionaire watched the exchange silently, his expression a mixture of respect and intrigue, already realizing that this shy waitress had become far more than just a server in his restaurant. By the time the plates were cleared, the atmosphere around the table had transformed. The bond between the mother and the waitress was undeniable, and the billionaire's interest in the young woman had shifted subtly, from casual curiosity to genuine admiration. A story had quietly unfolded over a single meal, one that would leave a lasting impression on everyone present. The dinner had drawn to a close, but the energy at the table remained warm and charged with a quiet, unspoken connection. The mother's eyes sparkled as she signed softly, recounting small compliments and expressions of gratitude toward the waitress. Each gesture carried weight, conveying not only appreciation but a sense of genuine affection. The waitress responded carefully, her own hands now steady, her voice tinged with calm confidence. The nervous tremors from earlier had vanished, replaced by a steady sense of purpose and pride. She realized, almost with disbelief, that she had managed to bridge a gap that others had seemed unwilling or unable to cross. The billionaire observed the scene, leaning back in his chair with a subtle smile that hinted at both amusement and admiration. He had seen employees come and go, some polite, some competent, but none had ever left him quietly fascinated in the way this shy waitress now had. He watched the mother interact with her so naturally, laughing softly, exchanging signs, and gesturing in ways that made the entire table seem illuminated with warmth. There was something remarkable in the simplicity of it. No grand gestures, no forced charm, just authenticity. As the mother signed one last gesture of thanks, the waitress instinctively mirrored it, her expression softening. It was a silent moment that spoke volumes, a delicate acknowledgement of trust and respect. The billionaire cleared his throat gently, drawing both women's attention to him. "I have to say," he began, his voice calm but sincere, "I've never seen anyone connect with my mother like that before. You have a gift, and more than that, you have a heart." The waitress felt her cheeks flush, a mixture of embarrassment and pride. She signed back quickly, explaining humbly that she had only wanted to communicate respectfully and make the evening enjoyable. The mother laughed softly, signing once more in a gesture that conveyed both praise and amusement. The billionaire's expression softened further as he studied her, realizing that her humility was as genuine as her skill. There was a pause, filled with the gentle hum of the restaurant. The waitress felt as though time had slowed, every sound magnified, the faint clinking of cutlery, the distant conversations, even the soft jazz music drifting through the air. The mother's hands moved once again, signing an affectionate gesture that spoke more profoundly than words ever could. It was a gesture of acceptance, of trust, of admiration, and the waitress responded with a small, emotional nod, her hands forming careful shapes that reflected her gratitude. The billionaire finally leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. I think someone like you should have more than just a shift at this restaurant. Would you consider meeting with me tomorrow? There's an opportunity I'd like to discuss. The waitress blinked, taken aback, her mind racing. She hadn't expected recognition beyond the table, let alone an offer from a billionaire she barely knew. Her heart pounded, but a smile slowly spread across her face, genuine and radiant. The mother watched the exchange, signing softly with delight, as if to say, I told you she was special. The waitress, her shyness replaced by quiet confidence, nodded in understanding, feeling a wave of emotion that made her chest tighten. The restaurant staff, now discreetly observing, whispered among themselves, clearly impressed by the unfolding scene. It was rare, almost miraculous, to witness someone's hidden talent shine so naturally, touching the lives of those around them. As the family rose to leave, the mother reached out, giving the waitress a gentle, approving gesture, something that was part farewell, part heartfelt thank you. The waitress returned it with precision, savoring the warmth of the moment. The billionaire gave a final nod, a subtle acknowledgement that this evening had changed something in him, in his mother, and in the young woman before him. Walking back toward the kitchen, the waitress felt lighter, braver, and more capable than ever. The night had begun with nerves and uncertainty, yet it ended with connection, recognition, and possibility. She had discovered the power of empathy, the value of courage in quiet acts, and the truth that even a shy soul could leave an indelible mark. For the first time in her life, she understood that sometimes, the smallest gestures could create the largest ripples, changing lives in ways no one could predict.